Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays I do my Q&A videos. And what it is you get to ask me whatever questions you want, and I will do my best to answer them. So this week we have some really great questions, and I'm going to get right into them. And if you want to ask me a great question, you can put it in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel as well when you're down there. And just leave a question and I'll answer it next week. But I'll get into today's questions. And the first question comes from Ronald Walton. Hey, Alan, my question would be, what is your favorite Dan DeCarlo cover for Archie Comics? Ron from Melbourne, Florida. Well, I instantly thought of this cover when you asked me this question. I knew immediately. There's like very few times in life where I have this certainty, like where I say, oh, that's the cover. That would be the one I would say is my favorite from this artist. And that is the case with this. Dan DeCarlo, when I think Archie, I actually kind of extended Archie to the Archie Comics line. So they had Betty and Veronica, they had Betty, they had Archie, they had Jughead, they had a whole bunch of series. Reggie and Me, there's like so many different series by Archie Comics. And the cover that I like the most actually is from the Veronica series, and it is Veronica number 28, and it's this one. Now, Dan DeCarlo, just for those people who are not familiar with this artist, he really brought sexiness and spiciness to Archie Comics. He would put these really sexy covers on on his Archie covers. And the interesting thing is, like, there was a few bikini covers before Dan DeCarlo got involved with Archie, but the number of like bikini related covers that happened during Dan DeCarlo's run at Archie, it just was through the roof. Most of the Archie covers that have bikinis are Dan DeCarlo covers. So it's kind of interesting. So this is a 1993 comic, Veronica number 28. And the reason I love it so much is it's the same reason why I like the showcase with Dolphin. I'm looking at it up there, is that you get this whole thing where you can really see the whole figure of the character, like, and she's in the foreground. So the first thing you notice is this beautiful female form, really, and full sexiness on display. And she has this sort of blissful look on her face. It's just really, really awesome, and she's diving into the water. Just a very sexy scene. And then you got, in the background, you got Archie and Reggie, and they're so hot from looking at her being hot that they're melting the snow. And that's what I really love about this comic. Not only does it bring sexy spiciness to the cover, but it also brings like this layer of humor. This, I just think that is such a great thing, that they can, make it sexy and fun at the same time. And I really enjoy that. It's very, very awesome. This is my favorite cover. There's lots of really great Dan DeCarlo covers. This is just my favorite. So that was an easy pick for me. Okay. The next question comes from Comic Mag Musings. He asked, okay, little Al from the FBI. Okay, little Al of the FBI. Here's my question. Vampirella 6 has a beautiful painted cover by Ken Kelly. However, I believe the woman's face was redone by Frank Frazetta. Is this true? And if so, why was that done? Was it incomplete? Did Warren not like the way it was done? This has always puzzled me. Well, there's actually no way for me to give you a really true answer to this question, because a lot of this information has been lost to time. It just, nobody would know unless you could, maybe do a seance and talk to these people. But I'm going to give you my explanation and my reasoning for why it was done. And it is true that it was done. I'm going to show you first, I'm going to show you two covers, and I'm going to explain why. The first is Vampirella number 6. This is Vampirella number 6. That was interesting. Okay, Vampirella number 6 from the Warren collection, and this is a Ken Kelly cover. So all of this was painted by Ken Kelly. His work is amazing if you're not familiar with it. And he did many of the covers for Creepy and Eerie and Vampirella. Now this cover has one kind of strange thing. All of this is done by Ken Kelly except for the woman's face, which has a very Frazetta, trait to it. It was done by Frank Frazetta. But why? It's a great cover, but why would they not use her face that Ken Kelly had done? And I think the reason is the same reason that I'm going to show you in a second. If we look at this book, this is Hulk Annual number 1, and it is a Stranko cover. However, it's the same situation that happened with Vampirella number 6. It has, all of this is Stranko, but the face is not Stranko. He didn't do the face. It was done by a woman, what's her name? Mary Servan. And basically the reason that they got the face redone was they thought it looked too angsty, or didn't look the way that they wanted. And I have a feeling that that's what happened with Vampirella number 6. It just, when they went to press, they decided, hey, this cover, the face doesn't quite work. And often what they'll do is they'll get a senior artist to redo the face, or they'll get a different artist to redo the face in order to make it more what they had envisioned for the cover. And I have a feeling that's what happened with Vampirella 6, that basically they didn't like the way that the face was rendered, so they redid the face. I think they wanted to make her a little bit more, like a lot of Ken Kelly stuff, the faces can be a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it, but more leathery, or there's a certain look to Ken Kelly's work. I don't know how to describe it, but they can look a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it, but not soft and gentle. Okay, maybe that's the best way to say it. And I think they wanted to contrast the monster and the girl. So the girl, they wanted to make her look really, really very demure, kind of innocent. And the monster, very Ken Kelly style, which is this kind of grim, like a leathery face. I don't know what, some texture to the face. Whereas hers is almost like there's no texture to her face. And that's much more Frazetta style. So I think that was the reasoning. I'm not sure. This is me guessing. If you have a different theory, or somebody knows the real reason, I'm just giving you my 2 cents, what I think probably happened. So yeah, so I'd love to hear if anyone knows the true story of why the cover was done by Ken Kelly, but the face was done by Frank Frazetta. I'd love to know. Both are great artists, by the way. Okay, the next question comes from Mike Swintel. I have a question. Did Stanley ever draw a comic book cover, or did he ever do any artwork inside a comic book? Answer, no and no. Okay. However, there's a very cool story about Stan Lee. He actually did do a Spider-Man artwork. So what happened is he never did any covers or never did any interior art. It just wasn't, he was a writer. That's all he did. And it's a very funny story about the original artwork that he did do. So what happened was there was a boy who was kind of his mom. He was being raised by a single mom, and she suffered an accident, or I think it was a health thing actually. She had some health problems, and she was no longer able to work. She was no, I think she was even in a wheelchair. She was in really rough shape. And the boy loved Spider-Man. That was his character. He even had a Spider-Man themed birthday party. And he just, his dream, I guess, would be to have something from Stanley. So there was, in New York, I believe there was some group that would try to help underprivileged kids to basically see their dreams come true. And Stanley heard about this request, and basically he drew Spider-Man for this boy. And I think it has like a bubble saying hi to the boy and stuff like that. And I'll actually link it in my community section. So I'll put the photo in there, and I'll link to the story, so you can read the story about it and you can see the photo. But it is it is good that Stan Lee did not try to be an artist, because he was not an artist. It is a stick figure of Spider-Man, and it's really funny to see. So yeah, so he did do one original piece of art, but it was not a, it would be very questionable if you really considered artwork, because it is very weak in terms of art. But he was a great writer, at least. Okay, so the next question comes from Andrew James. Do you have any Canadian price variants from the 80s? Are they very undervalued? Will the community catch on to these, like Mark Jeweller's books? Did you find them often in Canada? So I actually should have brought the ones that I have. There is like a few books that I have that are considered extremely rare and extremely valuable. And I actually did a video where I showed it in the past, and I kind of want you to maybe look for that video. Maybe I'll link it in the description, where I show possibly one of the most rare Uncle Scrooge related books. So what would happen is, in Canada, we would do Whitman variants, and we would have like these 3-packs that you could only get in Canada. These were not available in the US. And they would have often different covers for these books. So there just happens to be one that is incredibly rare. It was only available in the 3-pack, and my parents would buy me Uncle Scrooge, and they would buy me like all these comics, and they would usually buy the 3-packs. So I ended up getting it as a child. I later found out that this book, if it was in high grade, sadly it's not, because I mutilated it as a child, it is worth in the thousands. Now, this is a book from the early 80s. It is a very cool book. And I will link to the video where I go into the details, where I talk about Uncle Scrooge books. And it's a pretty good video where I get into the details about it. But any books that I got from the newsstands from the early 80s were mostly Gold Key or Whitman's, where I would get them, like, they would be Canadian price variants, because that was all we had. There wasn't much choice. A lot of my Warren books that I collected are the Canadian price variants. So the reason I mentioned that one Uncle Scrooge one is to say that the Canadian price variants are often much more valuable than the US price variants. So the prices have not only caught up, but they have exceeded the American price variants. And they're often, and the reason they're usually more expensive is collectors will seek those kind of books, because there are usually 1/10 as many of them in existence. And it's just based on population. Canada has about 1/10, 1/9 of the population of the United States. So the number of books that we would get is roughly 1/10. So that would, just means that they're that much more rare, and collectors are, seeking those rarer books. But like, I don't have any Mark Jeweller's books actually in my collection. I might have gotten one, but not intentionally. Um, but often there certain things like getting the US variants are actually, it's a little bit more challenging in Canada. So you know, that's kind of the interesting thing. So it's actually generally when a Canadian will buy things, we'll buy from either eBay or we'll import it from the US. So that's the way, at least, that I buy a lot of my books, is I buy it through, eBay or some kind of site that has the books in the US, because really the amount of books that we have here is not bad. I mean, there's lots of good comic shops, but it's just not to the same level as when you can shop from the United States. But a lot of the books, as I said, are Canadian price variants because that's all we were exposed to. Okay. Comic Book Ninja, and he wrote a big long paragraph, so I'm gotta bear with me when I read this one. Comic Book Ninja wrote, the average price of a comic is like $5 US. I think the comic companies are too focused on adult readers, which is why new comics are not the mass-produced mags they used to be. One of my all-time favorite comics was Batman Adventures, and its family of books based on the animated series. The stories were great and usually told the whole story in one issue. The key to me was that they got the best writers and best artists at the time, like Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, Scott McCloud, and even Mark Miller, to work on the different series. The thing is, these books were aimed at all audiences from 5 years old to 75 years old. This is what made Marvel's Silver Age so popular. The books today are so graphic with too many mature themes. There's room for all these types of readers, but the problem is big companies don't recruit the best writers and artists for all ages type of stories. I also think that going back to cheap newsprint would help lower the cover price of comics. Thoughts on this? So there's a lot to unpack. So first of all, I agree that what we have now is we have great artists now. There are some really amazing artists in the modern age. I'm a big fan of a bunch of them, like the Jenny Frisons and the Alex Ross, Scott Campbell. There's a bunch of really great artists from the modern age. Adam Hughes is another one. However, those great artists are often cover artists. And we had the same, even in the other ages. You'd have great cover artists, and then interior art was usually a little bit lackluster. It was usually like several notches down. And I think that's happening even more so nowadays, where the art on the cover is great, the interior art is so-so, and the stories nowadays are generally so-so as well. And I kind of want to get into an example of this. So recently I picked up the story, the Obi-Wan book. And I think the problem that we have nowadays with books is there is this woke culture. And I've complained about it in the past. I don't really want to get too much into the problem with that, but I do want to explain why this is kind of downgrading the comics. So what's happening is we got a woke culture in comic books where they believe that they need to have more diversity. And not only do you have to have diversity of characters, which can be okay, but they have to have diversity of diversity. So only Black writers can write about Black characters, or only Hispanic writers can write about Hispanic characters, or only, so what they have to do is they almost like pigeonhole everything. And as a result, sometimes there's not a really great diversity hire that can write, that can, do the artwork. And so what happens is you get that little bit of lower quality, because what's happening is instead of just picking the best talent, one of my favorite artists is Matt Baker, black artist. If somebody said, "Hey, Matt Baker, sorry, you can't draw white characters," he'd be like, they'd be like really dumb, right? He could draw whatever he wants. I mean, he has the skill. So it's about merit, right? About that skill. Nowadays, merit is sort of the second second thing that they look for. They look for that diversity hire first. And so what ends up happening is the writing is not as good. The quality of art isn't as good. Now they try to make it up by having great cover artists, but generally what ends up happening is you get this kind of second tier style of writing and artwork. Now, to explain what I was going to say about Obi-Wan, I read that story, and this is the next problem with modern comics. And the story wasn't bad. It's like the story is basically Obi-Wan is kind of reflecting on his past life when he was younger, and when he was back at the training with the Jedi, and he's like a young boy, and he's with a friend. I forgot the friend's name. It's like everything's forgettable with these modern books, but but I forget the friend's name. It's some girl, and he's like, oh, because of you, I'm here and I'm good. You've helped me kind of progress. So the first thing we always see is this dynamic where the boys, they're losers by themselves. They just aren't good enough. But with the girls' help, they can they can reach they can be a little bit better. And it's a common theme nowadays where they try to push men down, bring women up. And so that's the first kind of annoying thing that happens. The second annoying thing is she is bothered by a dream where she sees her father dying. And one of the things with Jedis is that they have to be emotionless, and they have to realize that the future that they see is not always the future that will happen. And it's the same reason why Anakin kind of fell to the dark side, because he kept on having these visions of a dark future where Padme might die. And by going out and actually trying to stop that future, he actually causes the future to happen. So one of the lessons that Jedi try to, learn is, don't be emotional, be stoic, be kind of, don't try to change things, because you might actually create the thing that you're trying to stop. And these futures are not always certain. So, but she, she's a kid, she wants to, and she wants to run away and go save her father. Now, this is one of the things that I find nowadays that I find really annoying about comics, is that what they do is they take a female character and they give her male traits. So that's a very male thing to do. Like a male will generally run away, will go out and seek danger, seek excitement. That's a very male trait. And the female trait is much more seeking protection in general. Like the females, that's generally the way they are. But what they do is they'll role reverse. They'll do a role reversal where the girl is the adventurous, fighting and strong and all this kind of stuff, and the boy is weak, needs help, struggling, is insecure about going out into the big world. And so it's like a role reversal. And what happens is, as a reader, when you're reading this, it doesn't ring true, because you're like, well, girls don't generally act like that. Boys don't really act like that. It's like you're kind of like your belief in the system that you're being presented with doesn't make sense, and you're kind of just taken away from it. Now, in the comic, basically, she does run away. He goes after her. He tries to save her, and he loses track of her. He tries to find her, but he can't find her, and he runs into some bad guys. The bad guys start fighting with him, and he gets beaten. But then, fortunately, she comes and rescues him. again, this narrative, the guy is inept, girl is awesome, girl saves the guy. So that's the story. So it's just this repetitive thing where it's bashing men down and rising women up. And it makes you not really like the characters, because I would be fine if both characters were strong, both characters had some ability. But generally I find it's this kind of situation, this kind of dynamic. And that's kind of something that bothers me. And I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to put in this woke agenda into comics, and that's what is discouraging a lot of readers from reading it. And bringing it back to this whole age thing, what happens is the comics that they're producing nowadays, there's this whole movement to either over sexualize things, under sexualize other things, and it's all part of this whole ideology that doesn't relate to kids. The kids don't really, it doesn't appeal to kids. It is not meant for kids. And even adults, it doesn't appeal to. So they're missing out on a huge market, because they could really write stories for kids that just have like the standard good messages, like good versus evil, that kind of simple narrative, simple story that kids can embrace, that actually have, just like the Batman Adventures series did, have that universal appeal, that it could appeal to a 5-year-old, it could appeal to a 90-year-old. I agree, Batman Adventures was awesome. It is one of the things that really made me enthusiastic about comics in general. That animated series was brilliant. It was the thing that made, for example, Mr. Freeze such a great character. I loved that. Just how it brought depth to a character, but also it did it in such a way that you could watch it as a kid or as an adult and you'd have the same appreciation. So yeah, I find, and the other thing is, nowadays I find you have to read about 20 books to get the whole story, and if you miss one, it's like, I like when a book is more like, it's not like an episode, it's more of a one and done, and then the next story is the next story. That can be that, like, I don't mind when it does it once in a while, where it's a series of stories that you have to read, but when it's done every time, it becomes very hard to get into a series, because if you come in the middle or you come at the end of that series, well, it just doesn't make any sense. So I prefer the more one and done kind of story as well. And that's another mistake that they have, because another thing, that if you're trying to get a young kid into comics, and it's like 10 comics that they have to read in order to just get one story, well, that's really hard. It's much easier to get a kid into a story if it's really just that one and done situation, where it's a cool story, happens in a book, and you're like, oh, that's cool, that was a cool story, I'd like to read the next story. So I think that's one of the big problems with modern comics, is they have it running for many stories, and they'll create what's called an arc, and then they'll do the next arc. But generally you have to read like a bunch of comics in order to get that arc, and it can be a little bit hard to absorb, especially if you're younger. So that's my opinions on a little bit about the culture of comics nowadays and what I see happening in comics nowadays. Okay. Bit of a rant there, sorry for that. The next is from The Collector. That's a great title, by the way, The Collector. I would love to know what you do for a living. Love the content. Well, thank you for loving the content. What I do for a living is I own a digital marketing agency. So my background is I was very good at SEO. I have a weird skill. It's a really weird skill. I see patterns. I really see patterns. So I can look at the search engine results and instantly figure out why one site is ranked above another site, or, and I can see, like, I can understand the rankings really, really well, and I can reverse engineer that. And I can help companies get their site ranked at the top of the search results for whatever keyword. And so I've been doing that for over 20 years, since 1998, actually. And I basically built a company doing that. At first I helped a few little companies, and then I got a few more clients. Then I ended up having to hire people to help me with my work, and it just got bigger and bigger. Now I have about 20 employees, and we do not just SEO, but we do web development and a whole bunch of things. Pretty much anything you can imagine online, we do it. We build apps, we do everything. And it's a great thing because, it helps me buy comics. So that's what I do for a living. It's a fun business, except for my clients have been really bad about paying lately. They're so slow. Okay, that's my only complaint about my business. Okay, the next comment in question comes from Nancy Swan. Do you collect extra comics on the side to resell or to help fund your hobbies? Not really for those reasons, but I do collect extra comics. So I do speculate sometimes where I buy I'll buy 3 copies of some comic. Or sometimes I'll upgrade my comics and then I'll have a spare. And I basically was going through my collection and I created a huge box. It's filled, and now it's got comics on top of it, and it's just filled with comics. And I'll show you some of those comics. Some are from my magazines. I have extras of these. So this is an extra. I upgraded it. I have an extra of it. This is Vampirella number 22. Also, I have a great faceta one. I upgraded this. You can see, I paid $4 back in the day. This it's a great faceta cover, Vampirella number 7, but it has a huge chip out of it here. Okay, so I upgraded it. So these are my extras. I just have them. My Vampirella number 2. Actually, this one is not bad. It's just got a rip on the spine that kind of bothers me. Right there. But, I upgraded it. So it's an extra that I have. And then sometimes I actually buy, by accident, the same comic. I do this every so often. I have this one, where I bought it twice. And this is First Planet Hulk or something like that. Or First, one of those characters. But, and then I have 2 copies of this. Great She-Hulk cover with bondage. And then we have this one. This is the first, Super Mouse or something like that. I ended up buying this twice by accident. I bought a higher graded one. And this one, I thought I didn't have this one, and I bought it twice. So I have 2 copies. Miss Mask. And this one I upgraded. This is Brave and the Bold. Actually, I had 3 copies at one point because I was really bothered by this part. It's missing a big piece right there. The rest of it's quite nice, actually. It's a very nice presenting book, except for this corner. It always bothered me. So this is a 2.0. So I got a 5.0. So I upgraded this. This is the first appearance of Wonder Girl. And this is another great book. First appearance of Wile E. Coyote. I actually bought this book, and it was cheap. It's $10, $20. Then I upgraded it. I got a much higher grade. But this is a very pricey book, even in a low grade like this. Then I had some extra pulps. This is a really great pulp with it's a really great cover because it's almost an homage, well it's earlier, to crime suspense stories where you got the decapitated head and the whole thing with the sword. Very similar cover to Crime Suspense Stories 22. So kind of interesting. This is usually a pretty pricey book. Even I didn't pay that much for it, but even like back in the day, it was $15. I think it's like a $30 to $50 book nowadays. So yeah, kind of cool. I just happen to have two of those. And then I have like some George Perez duplicates. I ended up buying this book twice. I don't know why. I just kept on buying it. This is the first Abigail Brand or something like that. Sword, I think. And then another one that I ended up, one of the situations that you have is like sometimes you'll need like certain books. So I wanted to get this full series. When I got it, I actually bought it twice because I had a couple of the issues, and then later I saw somebody sell the whole set. So then I ended up with the whole set, but extra of the ones that I had previously. So this is a really great series, by the way. This is Dark Mansion of Forbidden Love. Very interesting series. I believe it's Neil Adams art too. I'm not sure, but it's pretty great. This one is an example of a spec. It's like where I bought like I bought 3 copies of it, 1 for me and 2 to sell maybe. Or this is the first appearance of Christopher Pike in comics, so kind of a cool little spec. They're coming out with a show, New Country or something like that, and he will be the main character. So getting his first appearance in comics, kind of cool. So I got 2 of these copies. This one is the first Calypso. I ended up having this from way back when. Ended up buying it again by accident. So got it twice. And I got extra Doom Patrols. And ended up getting this book twice. Thor 137. So these are all books that I just happen to have duplicates of. And I have a whole box just filled with books like this. So you're probably wondering, what am I going to do with all my duplicates? Well, my plan is this. I'm thinking of having an auction on this channel where I'll do sort of a live auction. I got to figure out the logistics of it all, where I'll be selling these books. If people are interested, I don't know. Some of these I'll do as giveaways. So when I get maybe to 2,000 subscribers, I'll do a giveaway or something. But I'm not really sure. I really haven't worked it out. I don't need, like, it's not like I need the money. So it's, for now, I'm just storing them away. But, you know, it'd be great to have a little extra money, and, you know, it's always good to have extra money. I figured that all the duplicates I have probably worth 1,000 to 2,000. It's not like huge money because they're mostly the cheaper books. But, you know, that would be, I could buy something cool with that. So who knows? So if you want me to do an auction, tell me in the comments below. And if you have a question for me, tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoy this content, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Okay, thanks again. Bye for now.